had been at work, for knowing as he did that "Antoun" would gladly give him marching orders, he took pleasure in thwarting his superior when he could do so with safety. Bedr had been clever in enlisting the girl's sympathy for his soul. As for Biddy, she had disliked him from the first, and imagined that he had tacked himself onto our party as a spy, upon the receipt of orders from America, he having learned most of his English there. The idea appeared so far-fetched that she had abandoned it. Now, however, it was again hovering at the back of her mind. Bedr had told Rachel stories of the fascination of hasheesh smoking, and had said that no stranger knew Cairo who did not visit one of the best houses where hasheesh, though forbidden, was still secretly smoked. He had assured her that there were several which were perfectly respectable, even for the nicest ladies and gentlemen, and Rachel, probably at his suggestion, had tried to persuade Monny to make the expedition. Monny had mentioned it to "Antoun" in the presence of everybody, and, as Rachel and Bedr had looked guilty, Biddy guessed that they had wished to keep the plan a secret. "Antoun" had perhaps too brusquely vetoed the idea. He said that there were no such houses, which could be visited by ladies, and that it was absurd to think of going. That word "absurd" stung Monny. She began to protest that Bedr knew Cairo as well as "Antoun" did, and was as likely to be right. "I don't see why we shouldn't go, if others do," she persisted, "and I've always longed to know what a hasheesh dream was like, ever since I read De Quincey. A little, just once, could do us no harm, and Rachel says—" But what Rachel had said was evidently not for publication. Miss Guest stopped her with a hand on hers, and "Dear Monny, please don't let us think of it any more, if Antoun Effendi disapproves. Maybe it was a silly idea, and we've plenty of amusing things to do every minute." Monny was apparently contented to let the idea slip, and Brigit had thought that, in the excitement of getting ready for the ball, she and Rachel had really forgotten it. Then, before writing me, she had overheard Rachel say to her friend, "It's for 12 o'clock sharp," and Monny had answered, "Won't it be great? Does Bedr think—" But she had stopped short at sight of Brigit. Even this did not suggest to Biddy a visit to a hasheesh den, for various other plans had been broached and discussed by "Antoun." She did not feel that, as she was not supposed to know his real status, she could go blabbing to him, and fearing that mischief was on foot, she had wished for me. When I didn't arrive, she soothed herself by reflecting that, after all, she need only keep a sharp watch over Monny when midnight drew near. None of the party intended to dance, and so it would be easy, Brigit thought, to have an eye upon the girls. Monny had brought Oriental costumes for herself and Rachel. They were rather conspicuous, luckily for Biddy's plan, for among the many gorgeous dresses in the Casino she had no difficulty in tracking those two. Until 11:30, she told herself, she need not be on the alert every instant, but therein had lain her mistake. Sir Marcus Lark had appeared, dressed more or less as a Roman officer of the occupation days, he having heard Mrs. East remark that whatever anybody said, it was her favourite period. The lady, of course, had not missed such an opportunity to appear as Cleopatra. She had brought a costume with her from New York, and while Biddy lost herself in watching the effect of this magnificence on Sir Marcus, the girls vanished. Without alarming Mrs. East, Brigit had begun to search. She asked everybody she knew in the ballroom if the girls had gone out, and inquired in the cloakroom, but the two had been seen by nobody. It was as if they had melted into air, and Brigit began to suspect that they must have covered up their brilliant dresses with dominoes smuggled into the Casino. Willis Bailey was at the ball, but he had developed a flirtation with Miss Guest, and Biddy felt that he was not to be trusted as a confidant. Perhaps, too, he had helped the girls to disappear. It seemed cruel to frighten Mrs. East, when the scheme, whatever it was, might be no more than an innocent freak, so Biddy said nothing to Queen Cleopatra or her Roman attendant. She slipped across the garden to the hotel, and sent an Arab messenger off in a taxi with a note to the address "Antoun" had told her would find him. In less than an hour he had arrived, and when he had listened to her account of what had happened, he said after a minute's reflection that the ladies had almost surely gone with Bedr to some hasheesh den, or a place masquerading as such. Antoun consoled Biddy as well as he could, by saying that no harm would come to Miss Gilder or Miss Guest. Bedr would know only too well on which side his bread was buttered to take his clients where insult or danger could reach them. Off Antoun went to look for the missing ones, though, and assured Biddy that she should have news as soon as possible. It was not till 3 o'clock that she had begun to be very anxious, and had disturbed the harmony of Sir Marcus Lark's duet with Mrs. East. Even then she would not have spoken had she not feared that the ball would break up, and there would be no man to appeal to. Sir Marcus had been inclined to smile at the notion of danger, but he, like Anthony Fenton, was ignorant of any private qualms which troubled Brigit O'Brien. She could not tell him who she was, and that she considered herself far from being a mascot to her fellow travellers. If she had told, and added that she feared enemies who might for certain reasons make a mistake in Monny's identity, he would have laughed his hearty laugh, and said that such melodramatic things didn't happen, even in Egypt. "But you know," Biddy appealed to me, "that melodramatic things have happened to me and those near me. I'm not even sure that poor Richard's death was natural, though I watched over him like a hawk in those dreadful days when he was fearing every shadow, and we were flitting from pillar to post, with Esmé. Through Richard 2 men were electrocuted. He used to get threatening letters forwarded from place to place, always signed with the same initials, and he wouldn't tell me what they meant. It was because of them that he hid Esmé in a convent school before he died, for she was threatened as well as he. I, too, for the matter of that. Not that the child or I had done the organization any harm, but Esmé is of his blood, and they may have thought I had more of their secrets than I really have. I've not used the name of O'Brien for years now, and I've moved about so much that sometimes I have felt I must be safe. Still, I ought perhaps not to have gone to visit Esmé, though she wrote and begged me to, for special reasons I needn't bother you with. A curious little love romance which I fear must end badly. I didn't think of danger to Monny, but you see, as I've told you, the convent isn't far from Monaco. I got off the Laconia there, to visit Esmé, and when I came on board again, Monny and Mrs. East and Rachel came with me. They'd been in Italy and France, and had picked up Mrs. Guest, who was only too enchanted to batten on Monny's kindness and dollars. It was I who had engaged their staterooms on a cable from Monny long before, and if there were a spy somewhere, he might have the idea that I wanted to smuggle Esmé out of her convent by a trick, and "But almost everyone must know Miss Gilder's face from her photographs in newspapers," I broke in, on a stifled sob of Biddy's. "She couldn't be mistaken for another girl, as an unimportant young person might." "I'm not sure. Those photographs were snapshots, and very bad, as you must know if you've ever seen any. Monny never gave a portrait of herself to a newspaper, and it's years since they got hold of a good one. Besides, if she weren't mistaken for Esmé O'Brien, that wretched Bedr might have made up the plot to have her kidnapped for ransom. It was the thing Monny's father was always afraid of, absurdly afraid of, I used to think." "I think so still," I said. "Such things don't happen, anywhere, to a grown-up girl." "What about Raisuli in Tangier?" Biddy challenged me. "He used to kidnap people whenever he liked. And so do lots of brigands." "We haven't to do with brigands." "Oh, what's in a name? And I wouldn't put anything past that horrid Bedr. As Anthony said to you, he knows which side his bread's buttered. But if he hopes some one will give him more butter for being wicked than he can get from us for being good?" "Let's not think of far-fetched contingencies, dear," said I. "Now you've told me all, I will try to do something. May I come in?" boomed a big voice at the door. I knocked and nobody answered, so I thought the room would be empty. Biddy dropped my hand like a hot potato. She had jumped up so quickly from our sofa that Sir Marcus Lark's observant eyes could hardly have seen us sitting there together. "Of course, come in," she said. "Have you anything to tell? But I'll call Mrs. East. She won't like you to begin without her." Biddy darted off to an adjoining room, leaving me alone with my employer. "What do you think of this affair?" I wanted to know. "Well," said he, "I can only judge other men by myself. If I had such a chance to appear a hero in the eyes of a pretty woman as Fenton has, I'm afraid I'd be tempted to take advantage of it, even if I had to play some trick to make myself indispensable. Now you can see in a nutshell what I think. Captain Fenton will certainly rescue those young ladies from a trap if he has to make the trap himself." I was disgusted, and shrugged my shoulders. "You have a poor opinion of Fenton," I said. "On the contrary, I think very highly of his intelligence. I'm not worrying about any one of the three, though don't mention it to Mrs. East or Mrs. Jones that I said so. I've come to tell them that my men have searched Cairo and found nothing. Not the police, you know. I haven't applied to the police, after all. I thought Fenton would be furious. And anyhow it might make talk. But I've paid the best dragomans in town to look sharp, and they know as much about this old place as the police do, if not more.